Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of AI in the Enterprise. I was reflecting this morning, and the reality is financial services is going to end up having to play a really important lever in our recovery out of the current economic crisis. And yet, many of us will believe that we're not quite there today, that the current standards of digitization and financial services isn't where it needs to be. And I thought I'd pick up that topic and we together unpack that. And to do that, I'll ask one of my colleagues who I respect a lot, Mark Sullivan, to come join us. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Sanjay. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming, Mark. Mark, I know we'll get into sort of financial services and digital in a minute, but before I did that, one of the things I really respect about you is you spend a lot of time, I know you're chairman of the board for the ALS One. Talk to us a little bit about what it is and what you do there.
Oh, thank you for that. ALS One is an organization that's pulled together some of the brightest minds, doctors and hospitals and clinicians in the world to focus on both the care and the cure of the terrible disease of ALS. And we've made enormous progress over the last few years and continue to make progress. Those people are under unique challenges right now, people that are affected by that disease in the COVID era, where they perhaps had caretakers that can't walk into homes anymore, or other financial challenges that you might imagine that goes with that. So it's a wonderful organization, ALS One, and very proud to be a part of it.
Thank you for that, Mark. It's very inspiring to hear about it. Good luck, Godspeed with that. And with that, let me change gears. So we're going to come back to financial services, folks. Mark, you spend a lifetime in financial services. You advise some of the largest banks in the world. You do so much work in that area. I thought I'd start with you on something that I think is going to be a tough question, which is, what is top of mind for banks today?
I think the banks are all trying to extend their value propositions and get a better understanding for the value that they can create for their customers and the services that they can provide. In the past, banks have been driven in almost an industrialized paper-based way. We cash checks, we issued checks, we managed statements, and we ran a balance sheet against all of the above. Now, with new expectations from customers, they want things on a real-time basis. They want it right now. They love some predictive insight into things that they might need or might add value to their current situations. So the banks are very eager to jump into that space and create new sources of value and new financial impacts for customers that perhaps haven't been created in the past.
So, Mark, I'm going to push on that a little bit because, look, this has been on the docket for a long time. And yet, and we've seen so many reports, one after another, that has come out, and the new millennials, and the kinds of things that they prefer, and bank being the lowest thing on the list as an example for a relationship. And this has been known, and people have been working on it. So what's changed now?
I think the biggest thing that's changed, I think, first of all, the banks still aren't loved. Those brands aren't the top of mind. If you look at a brand awareness of Apple versus a bank, Apple's certainly going to come out on top, for example. However, the banks do a wonderful job of guaranteeing your funds, and they're one of the most heavy regulated industries in the world for that reason. And so while there are emerging companies, a lot of emerging fintechs and other areas that have focused on these new experiences, the banks have been that stability throughout all of this, which I think is critically important. What's changed now is, frankly, the banks have access to technologies that they've never had before. And the speed and the pace of change is unprecedented in any era that it's ever been before. So the opportunities for what the banks can become and how they might change their brand to emphasize financial wellness is at the top of mind and is truly a reality rather than something that they wish that they could do. It's unquestionably something that they can do and are doing now, perhaps faster than they've ever done before.
And is it also true that sort of managing economic capital and having capital adequacy and following regulatory requirements and doing things by the book was a big reason, was a big driver of success? But actually added to that now is the notion of experience and managing the client experience, the consumer experience in a way that is in keeping with the times around that. Is that a big change? Isn't that a big driver?
I think they always wanted to do it. I think their ability to do it is different now. And I also think they're more stable. We now have very detailed, comprehensive stress tests for all the banks. And when they go through those stress tests, we know that their capital adequacy is where it needs to be, even in hard times such as COVID-19. And so there's some confidence and some well-being that I think are in the financial systems that haven't been there, certainly in 2008, 2009, when we went through some of the challenges there. as they look at those experiences now, they're starting to think about how do I transform differently to add more value than perhaps I did before and address some of these needs that have certainly been on the list to do, but now there's an I wish I had perspective that's emerged coming out of certainly COVID-19. It's I wish we were more cloud-based. I wish we were operating more real time. I wish we had deeper, more thoughtful analytics about our customers that could provide insight to things that they might want or need so that we can become, so we can rise the bar in the value that we're delivering and the perception of our brand and the awareness that's created there.
Okay, so I'm with you so far, Mark. So you're basically saying, listen, it's taken a while, but we now build a foundation for the work that's ahead of us. Now the technology is finally in place and the I wish I hads can now be addressed. And so with that, let's just jump into it. So for our audience, for our viewers across the globe, and we're digitization folks with a variety of different disciplines and passion around it. And we're all focused on how do we put this into play. From your perspective, in that journey ahead, what's the role of digital? Where would you focus? What would you pick?
Yeah, I think digital is a big word that gets used a lot. But as we start to break down the various processes within a bank, and they are enormous, and they range from processes within a consumer bank, perhaps an investment bank or a commercial bank, and those are all very different, evolving in different ecosystems of technology. So as you break those down, there's some meaningful disruption that's happening there that the technology is enabling. Either cutting cost and making those processes more efficient, greater impact to the customer, different data sources that are being leveraged to provide more predictive insights than perhaps ever before. So the speed is breathtaking compared to where we were historically, and it's increasing. So as we start to move towards the 5G world, as we start to become more born in the cloud, if you will, I think that the pace of change is going to be incredibly more dynamic. And what will happen is the customers will ultimately dictate the exact type of financial services that they'd like to have because they will be responsible for designing them. And as those customers design those financial services, it will be the bank's responsibility to accommodate that at pace, which is certainly different from how they have operated historically.
Got it. Okay. So Mark, very broadly used, perhaps misused word digital can mean anything and everything under the kitchen sink. The pace is definitely picking up in banks, and consumers are driving the experience that they want that banks will now need to provide. With that as a backdrop, give me three things. If you were a digital expert in banking, if you were a CEO of a bank, what are three things you'd focus in here now?
I think number one is I think digital happens in the cloud. And so, how am I leveraging cloud-based technology, either software as a service, infrastructure service, platform as a service? What am I doing to create the agility that's required to compete in a cloud-native world where the banks have not operated in that cloud-native world historically? So there needs to be clear strategies and clear operating models for enabling that. That's certainly number one. Number two, how am I leveraging data in ways that I've never leveraged that data before? So how am I driving new sources of data towards different analytic insights that create value both for my company, my investors, and certainly for the customers along the way? So I think that's critically important. And number three is automation. I think there's an opportunity to reduce errors, which is critically important in financial services, and create sort of seamless speed in driving automation into the mix almost comprehensively around most of the processes that exist within the banking ecosystem. So if I look at cloud, if I look at analytics, and look at automation, those would be my three focus areas right now, almost regardless of what area of banking I would be focused on, because of the impact that those technologies can have. Awesome.
So you really just talked about accelerating cloud journeys and getting to that net native cloud-based service offerings. You've talked about data and analytics. It's a favorite topic of ours in this forum. We spend time, but you really reemphasized the need to get that data layer and the foundation in place, then to run modeling and new analytical techniques to be able to leverage and harvest that. And then your point about end-to-end digitization, I talk about the journey from automation and processing to autonomous processing, and how do you actually get to the final frontier. being key. And I happen to agree with you that those three are going to be key in terms of where the banks are going. If you were, one last question, if you were on the bank side of the house looking to bring all of this stuff on board, what's the advice you would give around the role of human in the loop, around focusing on the basics? Where do I start? What are your inputs?
Yeah, I think there's a fast fail mindset, and I think the banks, because they are so heavily regulated and arguably conservative in their approaches, they tend to measure 3 or 4 times before they cut anything and start anything. And the mindset of a startup is very different. Let's go ahead and develop it and try it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll fail quickly. We'll move on to the next approach. So that cultural growth mindset of constant innovation and change is something that I think the banks require in order to be successful. And I think it's probably the hardest leap for them. The majority of bank boards don't have deep technical understanding or startup understanding. Most of the bankers look like me. They have a little gray hair. They've been around for a long time, and they inspire confidence with blue suits and red ties. I think those days are over, and I think there's a younger generation that moves a lot faster, that understands how to solve problems differently and understands how to innovate differently. And embedding that type of culture into your bank, I think, is very, very important. The one caveat to that is the regulatory and the compliance agencies also have to do that, and they have to acknowledge that fast failing is part of the process, not something to be punished for. And they need to understand how to regulate that in a successful way, as opposed to a punitive way that creates value for consumers over time.
Mark, what a super interesting conversation with you. Journey to the cloud's getting accelerated. Data and analytics are becoming fundamental and core, and automation is becoming ubiquitous from end to end. Those are fantastic technology insights, but really the core of it, you need innovation, and to drive innovation, you need a new culture, and you need to actually put that in place in a systemic, methodical fashion. Thank you for sharing those insights, Mark. It's been fantastic having you on board. Please stay connected to the LinkedIn conversation. Hopefully that follows after this. And thanks for joining us today.
Will do. Such a pleasure to be here. Enjoy these all the time. Thanks so much for having me, Sanjay.
Awesome. And to our viewers, thank you. Please write in for any topics that are top of mind, and we'll keep the dialogue going. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.